One of Nigeria's renowned economists and the chief consultant at Adedipe and Associates, Dr. Adedipe, has advised the Nigerian government to have the courage to revisit the policy of Naira Flotation, which he said was ill-advised when it was announced in June of last year. Dr. Adedipe was speaking to the Nigeria's trilemma of exchange rate, interest rate, and inflation rate in Lagos on Wednesday. Let's listen.
When we unified the exchange rates in June 2023, I saw it as ill-advised, and I made that very clear, because data and historical occasions have proven one thing, that number one, we are an import-dependent economy. That's the truth of it. Now, some analysts might tell you we are not even importing enough relative to our population, relative to our GDP. That's a matter of playing with numbers. Because every ratio you talk about is playing two things against each other, the numerator and the denominator. Any of them changes, the ratio will change. All right? And comparing ratios also can be misleading. Because if you compare Kenya and let's say Ghana with Nigeria, you are looking at bases that are bigger in Nigeria. And so if the top is bigger than the top in Ghana, but of course relative terms is smaller, you will now tell me that Nigeria is not importing enough. So for me, well, let me say, stay with the academia. We call it dubious analysis. Okay, that's working from the answer back to the question, instead of from question to the answer. Now, the reality is this. When it comes to exchange rate management, there are 12 factors that move exchange rates. And then we ask ourselves, where is the position of those factors today in Nigeria? Now, also, we look at the big place of external reserves. And then we interrogate that and say, okay, how much do we have in the pocket? When you allow the market forces, the interplay of demand and supply, which is just one out of 12 factors that should move the exchange value of the currency, to now be a matter of willing buyer, willing seller, against our culture, what we likely get is a perennial loss of value by the local currency. And why do I say that? It is very simple. Now, the currency of any country plays four basic roles. Use money to make purchases, use money to pay expenses, use money to ensure security, and then you also invest money. Okay? But when you look at our economy today, unfortunately, Naira is the legal tender, but we have dollarized the economy in such a way that the US dollar plays far beyond those four traditional rules of money. So now, we not only use it in pricing services, pricing assets, we also use it now as a hedge. But as a hedge, it also plays several different roles. Hedge against inflation, hedge against the exchange value of the Naira, hedge against insecurity. So it has gone beyond the four traditional roles money should play. Unfortunately, it is playing that role in the jurisdiction that doesn't belong to it. Okay? So the question then is, let's look at the pocket. And I always cite China. When you check the external reserves of countries around the world, China is always number one. At the time, China had over $3 trillion external reserves, but they never floated their currency. The US doesn't need big external reserve because we all use their currency for everything we do. Go check the data. External reserves for US is always moving between 160, 170, 118 billion dollars to maybe 122 at the maximum. Go and check that in the last 10 years. So they don't need deep pocket of external reserves because the rest of us in the world, we use the US dollar for international trade, and the aberration in Nigeria now, where we have dollarized our economy. So the way it goes, therefore, is that for me is the big elephant in the room. Yes, no doubt, our inflation rate is inching towards 30%, and we are projected that probably we'll settle at 23.47% end of the year. But unless we take some hard decisions, now let me put it in context this way. We say that our president, and I respect him for that, is bold and also confident. All right? But when we bring the word courage into that, courage is what it needs at this point in time to look at a particular policy that is not working I had the courage enough to say, look, we need to correct this. Governments all around the world make corrections to policies that are not working. If the outcome of a policy is not giving you what you expect, you go back to it. For what you call regulatory impact analysis, RIA, means that anytime you introduce a regulation, if it's not producing the right effect, you return to the drawing board. You analyze the impact and then make adjustments. I think it's a time for us to adjust our policy on exchange rate management. As at yesterday, the dollar was already knocking on the door of 2,000 naira to the dollar. When Economic Intelligence Unit predicted that 4 months ago, I challenged it, I said, never. Naira can't get to 2,000 naira to the dollar. This your own outlook is nonsense. That was my reaction as a professional economist. But looking at what the market is saying now, I'm beginning to wonder that even the 2,000 naira to a dollar they predicted is something that might happen within this first quarter of the year. Meanwhile, their own outlook was for end of the year. So now, that's on the one side. So the question then is, if we don't have sufficient reserves in the pocket to pay our import bills, which of course later data available put at 1.88 trillion naira per month, dollar equivalent using the old rate anyway, is $2.303 billion per month that we need to pay for imports. So now, the other area where I think policy needs to be corrected to deal with this, and the challenge we are facing generally with prices of all commodities, is the reference exchange rate for computing import duties. If you follow the market, 4 times this year, and this is just February, the central bank has advised the customs changes to that rate. 4 times already. This is mid-February. So it means then that the key issue here is to ensure that when certain things are working contrary to expectation, we should return to the drawing board, interrogate the issues, and make necessary corrections. If you are import dependent and you keep marking up the exchange rate for computing import duties, you are piling more cost on anything imported, and of course, whether you like it or not, it will pass through to the final consumer. And that is what is creating inflationary pressures and the heat we are feeling all over the place. So if we bring it home to real estate, the question then is, how are these developments impacting building materials to start with? An investor interested in development of new real estate assets, of course, we naturally want to hold back. Now, for foreign investors that we think will be attracted when the Naira is floated, they also see that volatility as something that is not attractive. For a portfolio investor, there are 3 basic things considered. The first is safety of the principal. The second is the return. The third one is liquidity.